Hello, and a warm welcome to the Reform Party podcast. Today I'm doing a second in a series where I'm interviewing candidates for the Reform UK board. If you may have seen, I did one with Nick Goulding a couple of weeks back, and today I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Dan Barker. Hello, Dan.
Hello there, and thanks for having me on, Ken. And just want to say thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's adds value to the party and to the sort of activist movement. And I think it's something that I hope you get more guests on in future, not just the candidates.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email address in the show notes to this episode. So anybody who's is running for the board and who would like to be on the podcast, all they need to do is to send me an email, and we'll get on and do that. That's fair to everybody then. So can we start off just by talking a little bit about you, your personal background, where were you born, what have you done in life, that sort of thing?
Well, actually, I was born in a sort of an unusual place. I was born in Somalia, in Mogadishu.
All right.
So when you have these work contests where they say, you've got to have two things that are false and one thing's a lie. Sorry, a truth, or the other way around. Like these icebreaker. I always throw that in there and totally throw everybody.
So you're telling me you're telling me you're an immigrant then?
That's been said before. So my father was working out there. This is in the mid '70s. Installing a phone line system, a radio telephone system. So they lived in the country for a year or two, and I was born there. So I've never been back, and I'm not sure I could go back now. But I'd like to visit one day.
Yeah. But you live in Manchester, is it?
Manchester. Lived here for 25 years. I actually grew up in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. Still got a lot of affection for the town and the area. My family are all there. I go back quite regularly. And
have you got a family yourself?
Yeah, I've got two grown-up kids, so they're in their early 20s. That's kind of beyond that kind of school age now, a bit more free, pursue things like this.
Good. Right, and what about your political background?
So I'm like many in the party. I'm not a career politician, and I've only got involved very recently. I mean, it's about 3 years to last month, and I've turned 50 this year. So, I've spent most of my life not really, actively engaged in politics. I like that. But I got involved. Ironically, the day I joined the Conservative Party was the day that Boris Johnson resigned.
All right.
He was forced out of office. But ironically, now I think I've probably spent longer in Reform now than I ever was in the Tories. And I joined them because that's who I'd been voting for all my life, because I thought they were conservative.
Yeah.
And, it was, I had to find out the hard way.
There's a lot of people have found they've made that mistake, I think. It is interesting, though, because, one of the things I think that we have to be careful of in Reform is that we don't turn into a sort of Tory party light.
Yes.
And do you see that as a danger?
Well, I do. I think now, particularly now, you've got a lot of senior Tories or sitting MPs who are looking at the polling and the way things are going under Kemi, and they're probably thinking, when do I move? When's a good time to move here? But you look at some of them, the voting record on topics like the Online Safety Act, net zero, mass immigration, and I think we need to be very careful about who comes now.
I agree with you absolutely. My understanding is that we do have what they call a defection team, and that we don't automatically, a Tory MP comes along and says, I want to join Reform. We don't automatically accept them. That we do look at their background and look at whether or not they're doing it for the right motives. In other words, they're doing it to help Reform and because they believe in Reform, or whether they're doing it for more selfish motives. And it's something we do have to be very careful of, I think.
Definitely. I think it'd be worth, and I'm sure they do this, looking at their individual voting record, because if they've taken a stand on certain issues where they thought it was a wrong thing, that I would give people credence for that. But if they've just kind of gone with the party whip and now we're living with the consequences, I think we should that should definitely be brought up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was the chap who joined us quite recently, and when you looked at his voting record on net zero, it wasn't too great, really.
Jake Berry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of. I think there was quite a mixed reception to him
Mm.
coming over. Yes, I've heard people been going around the branches, and people have been commenting on him as is he a good fit for us? Um,
I
yeah,
did.
I'd
I
agree on
did
that
see an
one.
interview with him, and I have to say, after I saw the interview, I was more convinced than at first. But when at first it came out about how what his voting record was, I wasn't particularly keen. You also, I mean, the other one that's always talked about, Suella Braverman. No, I'm not convinced at all about her at all because when you look at her record in the Home Office, it was abysmal. Now,
Mm.
anyway, she didn't get anything done, is what I'm saying.
Yes, it's true. I mean, and I think the other one that was cited recently was the fact that she voted for the Online Safety Act.
Mm.
Again, and that's now we're seeing the full consequences on freedom of speech with that. I mean, that's at one. I think he could have picked a number of issues in the last government and said, resign on one of these, and you'll have a bit of credibility, come the next parliament.
Okay, let's move on to this job you're applying for on the board of Reform UK. How do you see the job?
Well, I mean, I'm hoping it's the real thing, and it's not just a a kind of talking shop that meets quarterly, and rubber stamps decisions that have been made or ideas that have already been decided in other meetings with other people. I mean, I hope this board is the one that kind of guides the party. I do see it now. This is a historic moment for us, in the same way winning in Runcorn and Helsby, in a by-election from a safe Labour seat was a massive, massive thing for us. And I think this is the same because it's, I'm sure there'll be a board of some description as long as reform exists.
Yeah.
But this board is the one that's going to shape the foundation that gets us in to achieve the objective of getting into power in the next general election. So I think it's crucial. There's a few things that I think I can see that need urgent attention, and that's kind of what I'm campaigning on. I'm sure we'll come on to that later, but I do think the job is these three roles are the members, and they should be the ones speaking up for the members in the same way that an MP is supposed to speak up for the constituents, even if it's costly for them, and holding, at least putting that voice out there, putting it on the table in the meeting, so that the board led by Nigel knows what the branches are thinking, knows what the membership's thinking, and then they can make a decision. And if they decide to go a different way, it won't be because no one told them.
Mm.
So
yeah, you see it very much as being a conduit between the members of the party, what's going on at branch level, and the leadership. I think that's obviously where it's going to be, because I mean, this is really the first building block, isn't it, in terms of the democratization of the party. But we have to be realistic about it, because when you look at the composition of the board, it's 8 people. Now
yes.
you'll have Nigel, and you'll have David Bull, and 3 others members appointed by the leadership, plus the 3 members who have been elected by the branch. So it's not that the power still remains with the leadership, doesn't it? I mean, and that's as it should be, because
Yes.
we're not at the stage yet whereby we want to have a full democratization, whereby everybody gets a say in everything. We have to be realistic that you won't have actually any hard power in terms of forming policy or changing policy, will you?
No, I mean, one of the roles, the functions is to sign off on the policies and disciplinary processes and things like that. And are we ready for the election? But the kind of the tools for campaigning. But I think I think definitely going in there with a collaborative approach. I mean, I think people think they're going to go in and kind of dictate to Nigel and the board. I think that in a business setting, that would be a bad approach. Never mind in a political one. I mean, from my personal point of view, I'm a project manager, and I have been for the last 25 years. And one of the things is, no one ever works for me. They're lending them to me for the project. So I never have line management control generally over my teams. So you've got to find a way of influencing them, motivating them, sometimes cajoling them and pressurizing them in a different way, because you can't say I'm telling you you will do it. And so I think that's a similar sort of skill set here, is also bringing things up, putting it across in a way that's positive, and also I think persistence, I find, pays off. If you just keep coming back to the same subject, is saying we didn't talk about this properly, Nigel, or whoever the others are, and people keep talking to me about this at the branches. Everywhere I go, they talk about this. So I think we need to talk about it, and just keep pushing like that.
Yeah,
I think that approach is respected. I imagine some people think they'll go in there, make a big play, hit a stone wall, and then leave the board meeting and go out and start, talking about things on social media. I mean, that is the last thing we want, isn't it? Board members.
I think others have found that out, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Going in with any kind of confrontational approach is not going to work, is it? As you say, a collaborative approach is what's required. But it is necessary that the leadership are informed of what's going on at ground level, because some of the decisions that they've made over the last year or so have not always gone down well with the membership, and they need to understand what the membership are feeling. Because I actually think in many ways the membership are quite often ahead of the leadership in terms of where we need to be. That they're a step ahead, and that step needs to be fed back to the leadership quickly so that they can take it on board.
Yeah, and I think we need to make sure that we don't drift, apart from the members and the branches. That in the way this so everyone's seen happening in the Tory party, is that disconnect there, not only with the public in general, but with their own base.
Yeah,
and that's why so many are coming over to us, because they just don't recognise the party at the top. And I think we need to be careful with that, especially as I think there's a kind of that pull, inevitable pull to the centre. Every party feels when they want to think, well, if I can just move a little bit closer there, I'll get more of that vote to get a bigger majority. And I think, given what we want to achieve and what we need to achieve, I think we've got to stay true to our values and make sure that the manifesto we go in with in 2029 or whenever it is hasn't been watered down. You think about the way the Liberal Democrats kind of infiltrated the Conservatives and took them over from inside out, really. They're just an extension of the Liberal Democrats these days, and it's totally destroyed them. And we've got to be careful that we don't fall for the same thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I actually don't think it will happen, because I think that the problems now are so starkly etched that people realise that there isn't a compromise to be done with this in this area, because things are at a point whereby we have no choice but to be hard on things. You said there's a number of policy areas you were interested in addressing. What are those?
Putting a lot of calories into attacking Sadiq Khan, for example, whilst I understand why, and he's ruined London, and he's a terrible mayor, and he's an awful man as well with some of the things he says and does. However, I think if you were going to put that sort of energy into displacing a mayor, I would say Tracy Brabin in Leeds, West Yorkshire mayor, and even Andy Burnham. You could probably get better results there, because I think those seats with the right strategy will be winnable, in the not too distant future. So that's one thing.
Am I right in saying you tried to win against Andy Burnham before?
Oh yes. Well, I think I did. I think realistically, when I joined in 18 months ago, where Reform was then, we were, no Nigel, and he wasn't coming back. Richard was the leader. There was a handful of councillors. We were polling in single-digit figures, and we had one MP who'd just been joined, or Lee Anderson, because he'd been forced out of the Tories, and we had 15,000 members. So actually getting, just shy of 50,000 votes I was actually really pleased in that election. I think if we run it now, I think we would probably be, a really strong second. And if it wasn't Andy Burnham in the race, I think Reform could have a run at that. I think he's got a lot of personal votes there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do think, Reform's fortunes have changed so much in 18 months. It's hard to believe sometimes,
Yeah. A chap just asked me this morning, would I run for Parliament again at the next general election? And I said, almost certainly not. And he said, why? And I said, because probably this time I would win.
Yes, you know what I'm saying.
I, and
Do the job, yeah.
But it's true. I mean, if you look at electoral calculus, where we're projected to win right across virtually the whole of the north of England, and also lots of other places, it's all turquoise, and it's good to see. And I think you're right in that I think Burnham does have a personal following, which would make that a hard one for us to win. But I'm not saying it's impossible.
No. I mean, I think so. If you'd asked me 12 months ago, I'd have said, not in the next 5 years. But I think now things have shifted so dramatically for Labour and for us as well. It's yeah.
Is there any policy? If you got to being at board level, and Nigel turned around to you and say, "What do you think we should do? What policy do you think we should adopt?" Is there anything you would come up with?
Yeah. Sorry, we were on that, weren't we? So. Yeah, I mean, I think the other area where I think we really need to get moving quickly is on the kind of building infrastructure to win the next election. And I know we've done quite a lot of this, and Reform Pro is a really good start, but development seems to have slowed down on that one. I mean, there may be a lot going on in the background, but it's not been highlighted yet. And I think the key thing for me is, whilst we're polling really well now, and we're getting roughly what we're polling at is being, translated into seats when we're allowed to vote. I think that come the general election, got a real world experience tells me that the legacy media, the establishment, the other parties, they're going to throw the kitchen sink at us, and they're going to use every trick in the book, whether it's fair means or foul, to stop us getting in. And so I think polling and passion is not going to be enough. We need to know what our voters are, and we need to know that they're still on board with us, because there's competitor parties starting now, and we need to know where the people are who might vote for us and what it would take to pull them onto the reform page. What do we need to do? What do we need to how do we need to deal with them? And I think when we do that, when we've got that basic in place, we can get our vote out at the next election. And I think that's the key thing, because we can't emphasise strongly enough, if we don't win this next election, or some sort of centre-right coalition, we'll end up with a rainbow left coalition, whether it's Labour, Corbyn's party, the Lib Dems, the Greens, and I think we'll be finished as a country. I think we'll be back in the EU. We'll be a rule taker on every level. That'll be it. And I think we've got one chance here. And so I think we've got to get it right on that front. And I think that data part really speaks to everything else that comes with the tools that we need to make sure branches can, win street by street, make sure that we get those seats, we get a decent majority, and that we work the marginal areas and turn them into safer seats. So that's one thing. The sort of data really important, and you can't do this in the last 6 months because it's a big job. And you need to collect the data over several cycles to build it up and refine it. So we need to be starting off for next year's elections. We need to have all the IT set up. People need to be trained. And we need to be knocking the doors now, really. I think a lot of it will get collected on Excel sheets. It will be the default, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of elections have been won on that basis. But if we want to, compete with the other parties at that level for the country, we're going to have to raise our game. So that's one of them. The other thing is, the big one for me is, I think that that members should have a say in policy, and I think that the other parties do this. I know the Tories did it in a way. I think we could do it a lot better. We could do it a lot more honestly. We could let them have a real say in it, and I think it's essential. What I hear when I'm around the branches in my role as I'm the Greater Manchester County Coordinator, so I look after about 15 branches in the region, and I go around those fairly frequently, and I hear what people are saying, and they're also saying the same stuff now while I'm going around on this campaign in different areas of the country. It's the same messages. A little bit worried that we're drifting to the centre on things like net zero, immigration, welfare, tax, all the things that are key, shrinking the size of the state, that sort of thing. And I think we need to make sure that we, give members a say, make sure that they're happy that what goes in the next manifesto has got a level of buy-in with the membership. And I'm not saying they should get their say on every, word or policy. I don't think that's realistic with, 230,000 members. That's one half of it, is giving them a say. The other side of it is I think, and I hear this because I get the emails, there's a lot of expertise and knowledge and experience in the membership on how to solve problems, on how to reduce waste, how to, save money. And I think there should be a way of them putting forward ideas, whether it's for council or government, and the party can look at those and say, is this worth developing into something, a policy? And, can those people get involved in developing it? So I think there should be some sort of route for taking those ideas from the membership and evaluating them. And I think that would mean that we would stay close to the members, that they would have a say, they'd feel engaged. And I think they would make us a lot stronger. I think people would feel a lot more part of something if they had that say.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And it was just it goes back to just what I was saying earlier, that in some ways I feel the membership are perhaps a step ahead of the leadership in some areas.
Yes.
And that's what I was talking about, really. We hear the same things. And also, I agree with you entirely that we have the quality of the people that we have in Reform is outstanding. I look around our branch and see the experience and the wisdom of the people in it, and it's tremendous.
Yes, the common sense that really strikes me as well. Yeah, it comes across. Yeah.
You said you were concerned about the competitor parties. Do you really think that any of these are going to be a problem for us?
Well, I think Tommy Robinson joining Advance, I think is. Don't really understand why Ben Abiba's allowed that. Because I think, I'm not sure it's going to help them. But I do think, the Labour are talking about bringing in proportional representation now. They've just lowered the voting age to 16, 17, and I don't think it's because they believe that the election system needs fixing. It's a cynical move to shore up their vote, and I think the shift to proportional representation, although it was in their manifesto, I think their motive will be the same. It will be about trying to keep, reform out. But if they do that, what that means is, all these smaller parties, even, kind of fringe ones that may have only started in the last couple of years, they may get a handful of seats. So, because based on, the national vote they'll get. And so you might find that, the way in Theresa May's government, where the DUP held the balance of power, didn't they, when she lost the majority? 5 or 6 seats, and they had, they ransomed it, didn't they? She had to pay the price for it. So I think that you could find the dynamic in Westminster would change, where these smaller parties would actually have far more sway. I mean, you look at the Green Party in Scotland, in the SNP and the coalition they only had 2 seats to fit, the SNP's 50 odd. Yet some of the flagship policies the SNP had were from, clearly part of the deal with the Greens.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a very, it's a rotten form of politics for that reason alone, that people who've got very few votes get a big say on kind of the government's agenda.
But we know it's all very well having high-profile individuals saying things on TV or wherever. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But building a party that can really get votes out around the country is not a short-term. We've done it very quickly, but in general terms, it's a long haul. I can't see how anybody's going to have the opportunity. For example, Advance UK. I don't think they'll have anybody standing at the next election because it's just too difficult to build up the infrastructure, to build up the party, to get to that point. So I honestly don't think that we have a problem with them. And when people. When Lowe resigned and people, a lot of the members were saying, this is dreadful, blah, blah, blah. I ignored them because at the end of the day, nobody's going to be voting for a Rupert Lowe party at the next election. We are going to be the people on the ballot. And anybody to the right of us, anybody, the ethno-nationalists or whoever, they have no choice but to vote for us because they won't have anybody else.
Yes, I think I do agree with you there. You know, even if Advanced UK was going to make any headway, it would be in the not this general election. It would be the next one, and that's assuming they put the effort in that, say, Reform have had to do. I mean, so Richard Tice has been at this for 4 or 5 years, hasn't he? Before Nigel came along back into the party last year. So yeah, I mean, it's a long, hard road to get to this point. Yes, I mean, general terms, I think we've got to be careful that we don't get too drawn into things that are, go down well with people, but then we can't deliver in terms of costs. So I think the two-child benefit cap that we talked about recently, you could see ways where you could modify that to make it work better if you lifted the cap. But I think we've got to be careful, we don't put in things that are just going to be too expensive to deliver. I think the reality of what we're going to have when we take over power is, I think the government, the finances are going to be in dire straits.
Yeah.
If we get an early election, say in 27, I would think that's because the government's had to go to the IMF for a bailout, and we're in real trouble as a country. You'd have to go back to the 70s to kind of see a similar time. So whilst it'd be great to get in control, the job would be even more difficult than it is now. So I think we've got to be careful, and I think we've got to do some tough stuff in the first 100 days, first year, to try and reverse some of the mistakes that have been made by Labour and the Tories. And it's going to be, tough love, really. I think people will know we're doing it for the right reasons, for the sake of the country, but I think it's still not going to be very popular. However, we do have Labour setting, this sort of standard for us now. They just seem to fail at every policy, don't they?
Yeah, I think we've got beyond the point at which we need to be popular, haven't we?
Yes.
I think people are beginning to realise, and it's obvious to me. I'm sure a lot of people are now saying we can't carry on as we are. We can't have 10% of the population not working and not wanting to work. We can't continue with the kind of benefits bill that we've got. We've got to cut it. And I mean, whilst it's impossible for Labour at the moment because they've got left-wing MPs who won't let them do it, it's so obviously the thing that we must do. And I think the people in the country realise that. And if we tell the truth about it and say, yeah, we're going to have to cut the benefits bill, we're going to have to do this, whatever, I think people will be on board with it.
Yes, I think so. I think the people are, they're sick of it now, aren't they? They see the waste, and I mean that welfare cut from the bill, that it was only a modest cut, wasn't it? 5 billion, compared to what, and it wasn't in 1 year; it was over several years, I believe. So the fact that they couldn't, even manage that tells you, they're not going to do anything difficult that isn't spiteful to, the rest of the country. So, I think that, it seems to me he's a bit of a lame duck prime minister now. I did hear a rumour the other day that he knows they're trying to replace him, and what he's threatened the Labour Party with is that if you replace me, I'll call a snap election. And you know what that means, don't you? You'll have reform in their hundreds in there, so don't even think about it.
That's a nice thought. That's a nice thought.
It is. And then he was on another clip that came up on my feed, was him talking about being Prime Minister for 10 years. I mean, the man's a megalomaniac. I don't think he's in the real world anymore, is he?
No, he seems completely detached from reality.
So can I just give one last word? So for those that are, I would be very grateful to be one of your three. I feel as though I am, a voice of the North, sort of raised in West Yorkshire, live in Greater Manchester. I know what people are thinking and feeling because I hear it all the time in my role as the Greater Manchester County Coordinator. I'm a chairman, I'm an activist, I've stood at mayoral level, I've stood at parliamentary and for council, and will be doing again. So I kind of live and breathe this movement. I know how important this is now, and I will work hard at this. I'm not here for the kind of spotlight, I'm here for the graft, and I will make sure that, I will be on the board for the 2 years, and there'll be a positive contribution. But, I'm not going to be a yes man. and I am going to make sure that your views are represented in the best possible way. So I'll be very grateful if you would lend me your vote and make me one of your three. Thank you for listening, and Dan Barker.
Great, Dan. That's been tremendous. And I think you've got another chance at it because there's a hustings, isn't there, on 14th of August? Are you going down to that?
Yes, going to go. I think with the, unless half the candidates drop out, I think we'll have about
it'll be a long one.
A minute, and then run on and off, with a microphone and do your bit. So,
well, you've had more than a minute here, and that's been great. And thank you very much. And I wish you every success at the elections.
Great, thanks, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Just now, thanks.